Hey everybody, it's Chuck Dixon back with another episode of Whatcha Readin. As a professional writer of world renown, uh, people ask me all the time, what are you reading when you're not writing? What are you reading for pleasure, for education, for edification, for self improvement? Blah 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 blah. And so I'm going to tell you what I've been reading recently. I recently completed this book, The Siamese Twin Mystery by Ellery Queen. Now, Ellery Queen may be a name you're familiar with, usually associated with mysteries, whodunits. Um, and Ellery Queen was not a real person. He was the creation of Frederick Dene and Manfred Bennington. They were also pseudonyms, but they had the shared pseudonym of Ellery Queen. No one knows how these guys worked, what their writing process was. They kept that a mystery. But together they wrote, dozens and dozens of Ellery Queen novels, short stories, edited magazines and anthologies and all the rest of it. And Ellery Queen was enormously popular um, as a television series. Maybe you're familiar with the television series, starring Jim Hutton, short-lived, and David Wayne. But Ellery Queen was popular in comic books. He was on the radio, movies, and he still has, speaking of he, like he's a real person, a mystery magazine, continuing to this day. It's been around for, oh my gosh, who knows how long, since the 40s. And extraordinarily popular franchise. Now, I became aware of Ellery Queen because my grandmother and my great aunt were devoted to Ellery Queen. They bought the magazine. They had a bookshelf lined with Ellery Queen novels and anthologies. And I never really thought much of it. This is what old ladies read. but my grandmother and my great aunt, they were educated ladies. So I assumed that, it must be good stuff. I mean, they like it. And then years later, I read an article in National Review that talked about Ellery Queen and a series within a series of the Ellery Queen books called the Calamity Town novels, where Ellery revisits this bedroom community outside of New York City occasionally and uncovers intrigue and deception and murder. And I should explain that Ellery Queen is both the author of the books and the lead character of the books, although the books are never written in first person from Ellery Queen's point of view, even though Ellery Queen in the books is a mystery novelist. Okay, does any of that make sense? No, it doesn't matter. So anyway, this National Review article talked about how excellent the Ellery Queen stuff, how well thought out all of it was, and also that the two authors were steeped in Roman Catholicism, and they based a lot of their approach to the work on the mores of the Catholic Church. I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting angle. Let me check a few of these out. And so I read a few Ellery Queen novels, and I found them to be excellent reads. As I said, very well thought out. These are fair play mysteries, whodunits, in which you are presented with all of the evidence. You can play along with Ellery Queen, amateur detective, and his dad, who is the chief of the homicide department of the New York City Police Department. And you sort of play along with them to figure out who the killer was. Now, what separates these from the average whodunit mysteries is there's no formula. And as a writer, I really respect it. Respect that these guys kept every novel fresh. They deal with the usual mystery tropes and all the rest of it, but they would do it in a way that it was never the same. I mean, sometimes the story would open with the murder. Sometimes the murder or the crime being investigated didn't happen until relatively deep in the story, after we had met and learned about all of the characters and what might have led up to the murder. Um, some of them are psychological studies. Some of them are lighthearted romps, as this one is for the most part, the Siamese twin mystery. Um, some of them are really, there's a couple that are really good cat and mouse serial killer deals where Ellery and his dad are in danger themselves. But like I said, there's no real set formula for these. These guys would come up with, fresh ideas, fresh approaches. Um, they turn their story on its head. Really clever. I mean, no wonder they were so beloved and had such a long, long life. I mean, these mysteries were popular for 50 years, from 1921 to 1971, when the guys wrote their last one. Ellery Queen was, you know, huge best-selling material. Uh, you know, on the general book list, not just mysteries. Now, this particular mystery, just to talk about the Siamese twin mystery, it opens with a great sequence of Ellery and his dad are traveling back to the city from visiting someone in upstate New York, and they run across a forest fire. And the forest fire sort of hems them in. They're in a chase to get away with it and get away from it in their car, and then cut off. The forest fire engulfs, both sides of the highway, both ends of the highway. And so they have to turn off at the first available place, which takes them to a creepy old mansion. And the creepy old mansion is occupied by a bunch of really creepy people, including a spooky laboratory where somebody is experimenting with conjoined twin animals, like a Siamese bat, stuff like that. It's just really, really creepy. And as I said, a creepy cast, and eventually, of course, there's a murder, and we're not just in a creepy old house. We're in a creepy old house that is due to be engulfed by a massive forest fire, which is closing in hour by hour on the entire cast. So you've got like 5 different suspense elements running here at once, and of course they're all trapped together, and someone in the house is the killer. And what were their motives, and how did they do it, and all the rest of it. And I will leave that up to you if you ever choose to read that. But read this book. But it's the very popular creepy old house mystery, which was enormously successful in movies, and radio and the rest of it. And it's just a great setting for a murder mystery. And the guys writing this have a lot of fun with it. There's a lot of there's funny scenes, darkly humorous scenes, and it's very much a more of a lighthearted romp than some of the other novels. Like I said, the tone and everything else would be different in each novel. The tone, the setup, the plotting. But what remains consistent is Ellery Queen and his dad. Those 2 characters remain consistent throughout, and throughout all of the books. And hats off to those guys, because they deserve the success they had, because they were hardworking writers, which I always admire, and very, very clever. Took their craft of writing mysteries very seriously, and I'm always behind anybody who does that, puts the effort in. Now, another book I read, I referenced this in the last Whatcha Readin'. I read David Mamet's new book, Everywhere and Oink Oink, an embittered, dyspeptic, and accurate report of 40 years in Hollywood. It has some illustrations by Mamet. Some of them are hysterically funny. He does these little, like, post-it note sketches. I guess he does them at meetings when he's bored. Now, if you don't know about David Mamet, prolific, hugely successful playwright, somewhat successful screenwriter. I mean, he wrote a few hit movies, was part of a few hit movies, but his work is consistently profitable, continues to earn money. This guy doesn't write summer blockbusters. Generally writes dramas and thrillers and comedies. But in the book, it's kind of a stream of consciousness. I mentioned post-it notes. It's like the whole book was written on post-it notes, and then they were put in order. It's very much a stream of consciousness. He makes references and jokes that he doesn't explain, that maybe people close to him would get. I don't know. It's a very odd book, but I enjoyed it. He makes no real effort to clarify. He just sort of flow along, and he might go from an analysis of storytelling and then jump right into an anecdote, funny anecdote about an actor he met. So it all sort of happens by happenstance. Or maybe he slaved away to make it feel that way. I don't know. I don't know what the process was. But this very much is an information dump, which I liked. Now, he goes off on the more nefarious characters you'll meet in Hollywood, producers and agents and things like that. He has a sort of disheartening story about a producer, which boils down what producers are now. They're not part of the studio system. There is no more studio system. Talks about a guy who was had a dry cleaning business in L.A., and his aim was to get the business of rich people who really don't care how much they pay for dry cleaning, so he could overcharge them. And one day he got a job from one of the studios to do dry cleaning on wardrobe for a movie. They needed this stuff cleaned up so they could use it the next day, and it was a rush job. And he realized I can charge whatever I want. They don't care. So he charged this exorbitant amount of money for the dry cleaning, and the person picking it up didn't even blink. They just signed for it, off to the races. And that's when he realized, hey, I'm in the wrong business. So he kept his dry cleaning business, but he kept going after more studio contracts to be the dry cleaning guy for various production companies and studios, and made a fortune, absolute fortune, overcharging for cleaning clothes. And then he decided, well, why don't I just directly get into the business and collect other people's money to make movies and then overpay myself? So this guy moves into the movie business, and he's using investors' money, because you never spend your own money to make a movie, even though he had it. And so in addition to dry cleaning, he opens a catering service, a bunch of other services that would be hired by studios. And of course, when he was producing something, he always hired only his own companies and only overpaid himself. And that's how he was really making money. He didn't care if the movies made any money, as long as he was getting the lion's share of the budget paid to his businesses. And Mamet's point in telling all about this was, this guy didn't give a damn if the movie was good or not, or even got made, as long as there was a budget he could spend. He also talks about agents, and it mirrors my I had an agent for about 15 minutes in Hollywood, and it mirrored my experience exactly. Mamet said that if you're hot, you don't need an agent, and if you're not hot, they don't need you. That's the story on agents. And if you want to know more through Mamet's own lens about the filmmaking business, his excellent movie State and Maine, about a movie production company invading a small New England town, it pretty much explains everything about Mamet's approach, or not the Hollywood style, the Hollywood way of doing business. Now, Mamet got to Hollywood by way of Broadway. He'd done a bunch of hit plays, critically acclaimed. Speed the Plow being, I think, the first huge success he had. And he got called out to Hollywood in the Barton Fink fashion. And they asked him, they needed a vehicle for Jack Nicholson. Would he write a vehicle for Jack Nicholson? And they landed on The Postman Always Rings Twice, a remake of a John Garfield, Lana Turner movie, and also adaptation of a James M. Cain novel. I wish I had Mamet in the room. This is one of the questions he did not answer in the book. He answered a number of my questions I've always had about him. He did not answer the question of why they changed why the beginning of the movie is not like the beginning of the novel. The beginning of the novel is one of the most famous opening lines in literary history, and they changed everything about it. They changed it. I always want to know why. And I would suspect if I had Mr. Mamet here and could ask him, I think his answer would be it was the director's choice to do so. I don't think Mamet would have made uh, that lousy a decision to change that opening. Um, if you're curious, the first line of Postman Always Rings Twice is they threw him off the hay truck around noon. And to me, that just tells you everything you need to know about the character, if you really think about it. Now, he moved on to independently produce a bunch of his own low budget films. He got financing, served as his own producer. Uh, First of which was House of Games, an excellent con man thriller with Joe Mantegna, often a part of Mamet's self-produced movies, and Lindsay Krause. It's a good one. If you like con man movies, if you like movies that keep you guessing, House of Games is one I would recommend. And he wrote the screenplay for The Untouchables. Came up with the famous line about bringing a knife to a gunfight, and Sean Connery's great speech about the Chicago way. That's all Mamet. When making The Untouchables, it was the first encounter that Mamet had with Robert De Niro. And Robert De Niro complained about the dialogue he had to speak, to which Mamet said, if you didn't like what you had to say, why did you take this job? And then Robert De Niro did not talk to Mamet for another 10 years, even though they would go on to work together in various projects. You may know Mamet from Glengarry Glen Ross, which is, for me, of a guy whose work I admire wholesale. For me, this is the pinnacle. This is the best thing that he ever wrote. And it's based on a play of his, and he very wisely listened to the producer and director and added a mystery element to the story so that it would work better as a movie. And he just, you cannot tell that element was not part of the original story. He so perfectly blends it in. And of course, there's plenty of anecdotes. When he was getting ready to make the movie Spartan, he tried to introduce Denzel Washington into playing the lead. Finally went to Val Kilmer, which he said he was perfectly happy with Val Kilmer. But they initially wanted Denzel Washington. And Washington met with Mamet, and he said, things actors always say, which is, I might want to make a few changes to a few of these lines. And Mamet said, well, I need all the help I can get. And he meant it flippantly, like, there's no way you're changing any of the lines. Denzel Washington took it as weakness. He took it the wrong way. And he thought, well, maybe this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And the next day signed on to do Man on Fire instead of Spartan. So, things can go south very quickly in Hollywood. Another great Mamet film that he wrote and directed was Heist, with a stellar cast and some great stuff. And he tells some stories about the making of Heist. And one of his stories absolutely confirms something I suspected all along, is that Gene Hackman may be the greatest guy ever to speak Mamet dialogue. And to attest to that, Mamet said that the thing that surprised him about Hackman was they would be on set, and Hackman would be talking to a crew member or another cast member, and then Mamet would say action, and Hackman would begin speaking his lines, and Mamet would go, did he start? Is he acting now? I can't tell the difference between him acting and him talking to a crew member. And that's when Mamet said he realized, man, this guy's an incredible actor. I'm sitting right here knowing the scene has begun, but thinking, is he acting now? I can't tell the difference. And sort of confirms my theory that, of all the actors, Mamet's dialogue is not easy to present naturally. He has his own patois, his own way of writing, his own way of phrasing things. And some actors are very, very good at it, and some actors don't quite get it. And some very, very good actors don't quite get it. It's tough. But Hackman always made it sound like he just thought of it. Like these were his own words. And of course, that's the genius of a great actor. Another thing that was absolutely confirmed, it was always rumored that Mamet ghost wrote Ronin, the Robert De Niro thriller. And it it's confirmed here. Mamet tells a story about how he was getting ready to make The Edge, or they were putting the movie The Edge together. If you've never seen The Edge, terrific movie. Alec Baldwin and Anthony Hopkins versus a grizzly bear up in Alaska. No, it's not anything like you think it would be. It's it's not a Jaws movie with a bear. It's much more than that. The amazing soundtrack by Jerry Goldsmith and beautiful outdoor photography. If you've never seen The Edge, you got to see it. Anyway, Mamet was trying to interest Robert De Niro into playing the Alec Baldwin part in The Edge, and De Niro said, I don't want to play that kind of role anymore. You know, I don't. That's the kind of role I've done enough of that kind of role. But I'm starting this real piece of shit on Monday, and I think we could use your help. And the piece of shit on Monday was Ronin. And so they brought in Mamet to do a rewrite, and Mamet said he was left completely alone. They just let him write the screenplay. Nobody gave him notes. Nobody interfered. Nobody tried to tell him what to do. And they shot the screenplay exactly as he had written it. So if you've ever seen Ronin and liked it, thought it was smart, and everything else, that was David Mamet, ghostwriting. His name does not appear in the credits. So anyway, that's what I've been reading, and hopefully I'll have more next week. I'll have to read some more. I'll get back to you. But until then, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all